Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In the Northwest Province, we do things slightly differently. There's a saying back home that a farmer makes a plan. And if you have a pair of pliers and a piece of wire, you can make anything work. Very much like using duct tape to stick anything. I've just been looking at the latest data that was downloaded now. And they downloaded yesterday and then more data came. And it was actually a little bit scary. In 2021, we had 25,353 burn scars. That is now the numbers of fires basically that we've had in the province. And a total 738,302 hectares were destroyed by fire. In 2022, we were very proud to say that our fires came down to 15,579 fires or burn scars, and we lost 483,492 hectares. Yesterday, I was pretty chuffed to say that my predictions were pretty close. I was only out by about 14,000 hectares. I thought we'd lost 550,000 hectares. And the latest data just came through now, and I thought it's important to mention it to you. We have had 6,280 burn scars. So that is less than half of what we had last year. However, we lost 601,734 hectares. Now, there's a big change in fire behavior. However, when we looked at this, we decided over the last 2-3 years when I got re-involved with the Fire Protection Association that doing things the same way as we've been doing it for the last 20 years is not working. I think it was Einstein who said that if you keep on doing the same thing and getting the same result and expecting something else to change, you're not all there. So we had to come up with a different concept. And that led us to develop a program which we called the CROP program, which is the Community Resilience Officer program. This is based on 10 to 15 unit standards or modules that we wish to present in a one-year learnership. The students will be resourced or sourced from rural communities, from tribal communities, from informal settlements, from youth who have been going through the institutions of the criminal justice system, people who've been bumping heads, what we call stressed children, the disabled, women, old, young, everybody. And we want to try and develop the resilience of our community so that the people do not have to be dependent on government for everything. There's nothing that irritates me more than somebody coming and saying, give. What about coming and saying, what can I do to make the difference? Kennedy said it in a different way. We have it in Africa in a different way. What you see on the screen here are our students who volunteered to go as a strike team to go and fight fires in our province. We had 3 helicopters that went, and this was part of the team that went out with the helicopters to be dropped in the veld or in the mountains to go and fight the fires with the helicopter, so that as the helicopter put it down the water, we'd go behind and do the mop-up. This is our team in the Northwest Province. We've got the lady at the top is Kosi Mutivi. She represents the House of Traditional Leaders, and she's the only woman traditional leader in her own right in the province. And at the bottom, we've got a young lady. We've got an older guy who's a friend of mine, and we've got a disabled guy who doesn't have hands. So we've tried to be inclusive, and I'm going to come back to this point right at the end. We believe that we are representing the total community in our province. We are not being exclusive by saying, if you can pay membership, you can be a member of the Fire Protection Association. We are saying, come on board, let's work together, and we'll get you to become a member of the Fire Protection Association in good standing. These are some of our students who are in the second intake. We've got girls and boys. This year we had more ladies than men in the team. And it's strange to say that most of the girls are outperforming the guys. We don't say girls have to run 2.4 kilometers in 14 minutes and guys do it in 12. We say you're a member of the team, there's a standard. It's an international standard. You either make the standard or you don't. Here is what we call the Kalahari Formation. We have realized that in our province, we are semi-arid. In certain areas, there's a lot of water. In other areas, there's not. So we are now specializing our youngsters as instructors. Now, this whole team has been trained as facilitators and assessors as well as doing the module or the qualification, which they finish at the end of next month. And they are already starting to train people in the rural and tribal and communal areas, in the far-reaching areas of our province. And we are looking at developing a way of fighting fires where there's a lack of water. Here is where we are teaching them how to make fire breaks. We are teaching them to make backburns. And we also have taught them how to make backburns in winds in excess of 70 kilometers an hour, which is no easy task. Our students also do a first aid course. In terms of the learnership, they just have to do basic, but we are going a little bit above and beyond, and we're also specializing in first aid and trying to train them to become trainers as well in first aid. One of our directors, Megan Mokwena, is an ICU sister, and she is developing this course for us so that we can make sure that if our people are injured or the communities are injured and the ambulance services are too far away, we can try and protect our community and save lives. This was a briefing session where we had farmers and our students working together to make a strategic fire break. And this is possibly one of our most important projects that we are doing. We have determined certain areas where there are hotspots, where there are constant fires, where there are high risk, where there's high hazard, and where we have minimum resources. And in those areas, we are now looking at making fire breaks together with government departments, municipalities, local farmers. However, the Rhodes Department, the National Roads Department, the railway networks, Transnet, Eskom, our electricity suppliers, and water affairs are not coming to the party. And unfortunately, about 60% of the fires in our area start on government land or state-owned land, and then all cross over state-owned land because there are no fire breaks in place. One of the reasons is that when we went over to a new democratic dispensation in South Africa, the government never transferred the property which was in the name of the Republic of Bophuthatswana, which was one of the Bantustans under apartheid. So when somebody has to accept responsibility for a fire, they say, oh, it's not us, it's another department, or it's somebody else. They're just passing the buck or passing the blame. And we have to handle this because it is a major, major problem. And with the software that we are using, we can actually determine where the fire starts and who owns the land and the title deed to up to 4 decimals of a hectare. And now that we are doing this, we've made it very, very uncomfortable because there's no squirming area left because we can actually now pinpoint which department is responsible. One of the skills courses that we do in our organization is sewing as well. We are not only looking at firefighting, we are looking at creating jobs in the rural areas where we can make our own protective clothing, where we can make haversacks and bags, where we can make carry bags for our equipment. And the whole idea behind this is we want the young people that we are training to be able to start their own business so that they can tender and supply services to government departments, to schools, to make school uniforms, so that we can keep them in their rural areas so they don't have to urbanize to go and look for a job. But at the same time, they also do a couple of modules, and this is where the resilience officer part comes in. Because in the modules that we have, 4 will be firefighting, 1 will be IT and communications. In other words, we're teaching somebody how to use a cell phone to report a fire or to report an accident, how to do banking, how to do cell phone banking. We then are looking at basic business skills and home finance, and we are doing home-based care and first aid, and then a number of elective courses. So this young lady is now going to be one of our candidate instructors in sewing. She was unemployed, but she's got a skill. And we are hoping that she will then be able to transfer her skill to others. But if we need her as a reservist or as a volunteer in her area, she'll be able to be activated to go and assist to fight the fires. We also made the firefighting equipment because we are teaching welding and engineering as well. So this is part of the Resilience Officer program. There are some of the overalls that we've made. This is a drip torch that was made. The grass beater, which is basically a broomstick with a conveyor belt that has been cut. These are some of the things that we're teaching the people to make so that they can earn a living for themselves. A unit like this would most probably cost you anything between 50 and 100,000 Rand, depending on the size and the complexity. But if we can make it out of scrap material, and we can make it cheaply, and we can make it in the village, we can keep the money there, and we can help to develop the local economy. And that is where the resilience officer part comes in, where we are trying to look at the resilience of the community itself.
Oh, well, nothing that we can do now. Currently, I'm doing 45 kilometers an hour. There is about 300 cattle inside of disadvantaged people. I'm driving next to the fire. I don't know what happened to that cattle. They are somewhere into that fire. There's absolutely nothing that we can do now. Personally, I think they all burned to death. Here is a few working on fire people trying their best to save this cattle. Here you can see there is a few of them, but the fire is just behind. There's absolutely nothing that we can do now. God have mercy on them.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a very profound video clip. That is Dr. Kobus Roux, our general manager and also the chairman of the Potchefstroom FPA. When this fire occurred, my son and our students picked up poachers lighting the veld so that they could destroy the tall grass, thatching grass, so that the green grass would come through, so that they could hunt a lot easier with their dogs. And within 3 to 5 minutes, we had a chopper in the air, we had the teams on the ground within 5 minutes, and we still couldn't hold the fire. It was just not possible in this type of wind. The wind speed there, as you can see, was between 45 and 80 kilometers an hour. This is scary, ladies and gentlemen. I don't want to have to go through this type of thing again. This is the hospital for the mentally ill that our students and the chopper and 2 vehicles from the fire brigade services protected. The patients actually walked out of their wards in their underpants, coming to look at the chopper throwing the water around their wards. And nobody took a picture. We were too busy, but the lumps were in our throat and the tears were in our eyes when we realized that if we didn't do something, people would have died. This is an illegal tire dump, which was more than 1 kilometer long and about 50 odd meters wide, if not a bit wider. As you can see, there were no fire breaks on the side of the dump. They packed the tires up to the end of the fence. They never had any barriers. They had a few I think 50 or 100 liter fire extinguishers, and that was it. The fire started on the Rhodes Reserve at a bridge. Somebody was fishing under the bridge. He made a little fire to have a barbecue, and the fire ran in the wind. And it then burnt down the dump, and it went into the neighboring area. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is at the top here is the Harts River. And this pollution is currently, as we speak, going into the river, going to a Ramsar World Heritage Site, which is a bird reserve about 20 kilometers downstream. There are also 2 or 3 other dams downstream where this water is the only drinking water for the community. Now, why I'm pointing this out to you is when the fire was roughly there, we wanted to activate the helicopter to go and put on a retardant, flame retardant and foam. And we were told, you can't put out the fire. We didn't say we want to put out the fire. We said we want to retard the fire so that we could put in people by hand and open up a gap that we could prevent the fire from spreading. This happened on the 19th of August. Look where we are now, and there are still tires smoldering. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment have done nothing about it. The Disaster Management Center in the province went there, had meetings, decided they don't have to try and prevent the smoke, the pollution, the air pollution, the water pollution. No criminal cases were made against the perpetrators, and this is a catastrophe. It's an environmental disaster that is waiting to happen. I believe there are a lot of people who are going to be getting ill, and we're going to be losing a lot of animals after this in the rainy season, because all this, when it rains, there are no berms, there's nothing done in mitigation, and it's all going to wash down into the river, and the people will be drinking it for years to come. This is the community that was saved by our students and the helicopter when the fire was running, the one that Dr. Roo was talking about. These people are staying illegally in a game reserve, and they are illegally grazing their cattle there. But the government, once again, is doing nothing about it. But as you can see, the houses are all over here and the shacks. And we didn't have loss of one cow, no goats, no sheep, or anybody at that fire. It's just a miracle that we've managed to save the people's lives. Fires, droughts, floods, and environmental degradation go together. Last year, after we had catastrophic fires in the area, we had a very wet La Nina season, and there was no vegetation left to slow down or prevent the wash off of the rainwater. As you can see, the water here is very brown, so there was a lot of topsoil that was washed down. There was, over a period of time, this one was, I can't see the date here, it's under there, but I think the first one was in June or July or September, and the one was in November. And these people who are staying here are staying illegally in a floodplain. What the government then did is they went and put up electricity poles for them illegally. They went and put up sanitation for them illegally. And when the rain came, there were floods, and the people had to be displaced. But the worst of the lot is the community refused to move. Now, that I don't understand. And when we started doing the research with the university, because I'm part of the team, we found out that some of the councillors were actually encouraging the people to stay there so that they could increase the number of votes in their ward. And they promised the people that if you are affected by the flood, we will then jump you in the queue and you will then get a house from the government quicker. But then you have to vote for me. Now, I think our colleagues from the European countries and in the East and in the US won't understand this, but it's happening here, that people are buying votes at the cost of people's lives. This is what happens when the water runs down. Some of our members had to actually go and help school children and teachers to get from the school to the bus. But your problem that you have here is Ambulances can't move. Firefighting equipment can't move. We can't protect the community. Children can't get to school. And we tried to declare a state of disaster for fires. Then we tried to declare the state of disaster for floods. And a national state of disaster was declared, but only for one village, the previous village that I mentioned, where I said the people were staying illegally. And the people here in a formal settlement were not given any assistance at all. This is the area where we were staying. I was staying just around the corner from here, and we used to walk from there to the hall when they had the major fires at the end of last year when we went to go and assist in the area. And this just goes to show what happens when no maintenance is done, no stormwater drainage is in place, and you're not looking after the environment. The problem, unfortunately, happens here. You have good rains every couple of years, and that water must be retained so that it recharges the underground aquifers. And if it's not done, it leads to droughts, because then the boreholes will not be able to produce the required drinking water for the animals or for crops. 2 minutes left. Sorry? 2 minutes left. Ladies and gents, we did a SWOT analysis in the area, in the province, in all 20 FPA areas. And it is interesting how the basic strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats were there. In certain areas, it may have been at the top of the list. In certain areas, it was a bit lower down on the list, but the major points were the same. These are sinkholes in the area, and Roman's parent-in-law stay in this area in Carltonville. This is the traditionally black township under apartheid. This sinkhole happened because of a leaking pipe. 6 months later, it grew a little bit more, but nobody was evacuated. And a few months later, it grew even more. And by the time people started waking up, this house had been destroyed. But you'll see the lady sitting there, and she would not move because they wanted to go and put her into a little RDP house, and she couldn't even fit a double bed into the bedroom. This is my favorite disaster photo with regard to sinkholes. It's a sinkhole that I picked up just a few meters away from primary school. And it took us about 3 to 4 years, and Sun and I have been involved in this for quite some time, to get them to close the sinkholes, to try and barricade them and do something about it. And we warned them. The University of Northwest takes students there every year to go and look at it. And one year when we went there, we said to them, there's a high school that's at risk. And guess what? A few days later, a few weeks later, they had another sinkhole. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, these are the points that we look at. You have to be inclusive. You've got to teach people to have respect in disaster management. There must be discipline. You can't take people to a fire line or to a disaster and give an instruction and says, no, I don't want to. They have to follow it. It's a militaristic type of discipline. You've got to respect people's culture. You have to have pride in what you do. And you've got to be committed to what you do. We teach people life skills, and we've got to look at the socio-economic rehabilitation as part of the program in the development of the resilience program. And then finally, you've got to have a path to continual improvement. You can't say you've trained somebody and now you're finished. You've got to keep on giving them the target to say, you have to improve yourself and you have to improve and carry on. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you for having me here today. Hope you can see me.
Just wait 1 second.
Move first.
Yeah, just move it to the other side. Okay, cool.
So today we've talked about COVID-19 a lot. This afternoon we heard about cyber threats and attacks in university computer systems. Earlier today we talked about time of accelerated change, which is also applicable to what I'm going to speak about. But they dove specifically into technology and technological disasters. But I'm going to start with the internet, which is something that we all know, love, use every day and rely on heavily. So from a technical standpoint, the internet is described as a global network that uses transmission control protocols and internet protocols. The internet started as a concept on paper about 50 years ago, and as of 2023, there are 6.92 billion smartphone users worldwide. That is equivalent to 86.29% of the world's population that has a smartphone with internet capabilities. TCP and IP expands beyond the individual use. So I wrote this paper as a part of a critical infrastructure course. Experts anticipate that the internet would connect more machines than people. Billions more machines communicate via internet, from automobiles, factories, power grids, gas, oil pipelines, water systems, and everyday products. So in my own personal work experience dealing with recovery, the sewage treatment plant was completely destroyed during Sandy. And it was the electrical systems that were flooded. And that's why the system completely shut down. We're still in the process of mitigating that. Construction will be complete in 2026, but Superstorm Sandy made landfall in 2012, 2026. Long-term recovery usually takes between 10 to 15 days. So a lot of the times when I tell people I'm still working on Superstorm Sandy, they always ask me how. And then I remind them of the devastation that we had from that, but that's a little bit of a sidebar. At the 2017 CyberCon, government and industry experts emphasized that the internet is tied to more and more tied to critical infrastructure, changing the perspectives on what constitutes critical infrastructure. Because when we usually think about critical infrastructure, we think of those physical things like wastewater treatment plants, and we don't think about the internet. But as I said, we use and rely on the internet to connect us every single day. So another quote is, more and more things are connecting to each other and we're becoming more reliant on that connectivity. Now I'm going to shift to COVID-19. On December 3rd, 2019, the World Health Organization was notified of cases of pneumonia and unknown causes, later to be known as the novel coronavirus. And February 21st, 2021, the World Health Organization SITREP explained that the new coronavirus 2019 is caused by SARS-CoV-2, and then they provided recommendations and advice based on previous outbreaks of SARS and MERS. The basic principle to reducing this is to avoid close contact, to stop the spread. That was the big slogan in New York: stop the spread, stay home, stop the spread. As the confirmed cases and deaths soared, that's when the stay-at-home orders began to issue. In the United States, that wasn't done blanketly. That was something that was done differently at different times in different states. But ultimately, I believe every state did issue stay-at-home orders at one time or another. So the internet co-evolved with the adaptation of the consumer PC that many of us have used throughout this conference. Without the PC and the internet may not have as significant of an impact as it does today. The co-evolution propelled global societies into the internet age that we are all in today. Characterized by extremely high connectivity, short time intervals in between events, adaptability, and flexibility. COVID-19 rapidly changed how we connect for business and pleasure. In order to maintain the continuity of operations and reliance on internet and PCs was even more necessary during COVID-19. The necessary shift from meeting in person required reliance on emerging video conference applications such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and others to overcome the limited social distancing that was required. Switching gears to cybercrime. So the dependency increased on ever-changing technologies. Cyberspace became a breeding ground for cybercriminals. Over 100 cybersecurity bills and resolutions have been presented, but nothing has passed yet. From cyber criminal perspective, that provides even more room for activity, unfortunately. Due to the fragmented layer of the internet, deviant and criminal behavior is stimulated because there's no centralized governing body to enforce criminal laws. And again, the cost of cybercrime is a significant incentive because there is a high dollar value associated with it. So in 2020, the cybercrime expense was expected to rise from 3 trillion in 2015 to 10.5 trillion US dollars by 2025. Again, going back to Microsoft Teams, unfortunately, they received warnings from security specialists and privacy groups and lawmakers that their default configurations were unsafe. In the cybersecurity world and with cyber criminals, opportunist attackers exist. So what an opportunistic attacker is they wait for what's known as the perfect storm. And that's exactly what COVID-19 was. They usually exploit natural disasters, continuing crises, and sufficient public events. Again, COVID-19. Even though the unsecure nature of the internet provides many opportunities on a blue sky day, COVID-19 was their playing ground, and we'll go into that next. So on April 8th, 2020, the National Cybersecurity Center of the United Kingdom and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA of the United States, created a joint advisory committee. Among the aims of this committee are to describe how cyber criminals and advanced persistent threat, APT groups, were exploiting the pandemic to provide how to avoid computer security threats. The vulnerabilities highlighted by this advisory committee were phishing and infiltration through community platforms such as Zoom and, unfortunately, again, Microsoft Teams. I hope no one here works for Teams or knows anyone that does, because I'm really not attacking them, but this is what the data says. There's also something known as the fraud triangle of cybercrime. That is victim, motive, and opportunity. Again, all of the things that COVID so greatly provided them. Motive is finance. Opportunity is the exploitation of the fear of COVID-19. And victims, people were relying on our computers, our iPads, our phones for work, for school, for social cohesion, all the more. So that increased access to potential victims. The fraud triangle of cybercrime. Cyber criminals exploited the panic and fear to their benefit by creating different strategies to launch cyber attacks. For instance, the high demand goods like PPE and testing kits. I know in the US, they had to create different sections on price gouging and faulty PPE because this became such a really big problem. So in the late 2019 and 2020 became known as the cybersecurity pandemic due to the significant increase in cyber attacks that were related to COVID. 18 million malware and phishing emails were blocked by Google every day during April 2020. So again, this is just to point to the fact that there was a huge increase in phishing attacks during COVID-19 because of that fraud triangle of cybercrime, unfortunately. The World Economic Forum highlighted that the pandemic resulted in a 50.1% increase in cyber attacks, with 30,000 explicitly related to COVID-19. Interpol explained that from January to April 2020 was a massive increase to different attacks and threats, including 907,000 messages of spam, 737 incidents of malware, and 48,000 malicious URLs, all associated with COVID-19. Again, this is a graph that shows the most common attacks from January to April 2020, kind of the peaks of COVID, where we can see that 59% of people reported phishing and scam fraud And evidently, phishing and scam fraud emails were found to be most common attacks used by cyber criminals during this time frame. Cyber criminals again utilized COVID-19 to their advantage, and unfortunately, it worked. Google reported that they managed to block 126 phishing email schemes in 1 week. This graph shows cyber attacks after 2020, after COVID, I'm sorry, with 55% being exfiltration and 51% being phishing. Exfiltration and phishing were obviously highlighted as the highest. Half of the respondents stated that within the week of this survey, they had received a phishing email. I got one yesterday. I get them all the time. This is still something that exists. It's not going anywhere. There's another quote that I want to share with you, and it says, "A breach of software and security in one computer can spread like an epidemic to millions of other information systems, all throughout the global connectivity provided by the internet. While the internet was designed to be redundant, it was not designed to be secure." Working from home. Many corporations have either used or toyed with the idea of working from home since 1973. COVID-19 forced businesses and schools to adapt to this work from home culture, especially in the United States, whether it was something they were ready to do or not. This next statistic freaked me out the first time I heard it. It still does. 90% of hack attacks are successful due to human error. 90%. Working from home employees tend to develop security amnesia, abandoning routine office security practices such as forwarding suspicious emails, spam, blogs, and things to their IT departments. Working from home presents a serious vulnerability to cybersecurity threats such as malicious hackers and social engineers. Social engineering is an attack vector that relies heavily on human interaction. That relies heavily on human interaction that involves manipulating people into breaking their normal security protocols, procedures, and best practices in order to gain access to computer systems, networks, physical locations for financial or other gain. So phishing is the prime example of social engineering. Social engineering is something that has been around for many years, and it's something, again, that's not going away. So it's something to be aware of.
3 minutes left.
The Global COVID-19 2020 Work from Home Experience Survey. So this survey was conducted in May 2020, and there were interviews conducted with 12 professionals, from managers ranging from 24 to 62, from large corporations, small businesses, all focusing on cybersecurity threats to the employees mandated to work from home. The interviews were asked standard questions. What do you like or dislike about working from home? Do you have any concerns about cybersecurity, documentation managing, or anything of that nature while you're working from home? The scary part about this survey is that employees admitting to using workarounds and forwarding their work emails to their personal emails or their home computers due to familiarity with those systems or issues with their VPN connections. Therefore, again, creating an easy avenue for cyber criminals to do what they do best. With an average employee sending 124 emails a day, and with daily email traffic increasing 5% year after year, deciphering data exfiltration with email logs is like finding a needle in a haystack. Some of the quotes that came from that survey are, "Don't tell my IT guy, but I have discovered interesting workarounds to get my job done more efficiently. Yes, I send my personal emails from my work accounts and vice versa. I discovered a great deal of functionality I use on my work laptop I can use on my apps on my smartphone." And another one is, "Sometimes I forget I'm even on the clock. Even though I'm working at home, I surf the web for long periods of times. I don't feel guilty because I work more than 8 hours, but I don't want to get caught." Interview results. The results of this survey concluded that most participants prefer the freedom of working from home, because it's a free, unrestricted environment as opposed to the restrictive office environment. Working from home benefits are substantially hard to relinquish once they've been experienced. A majority of the interviewers stated that they were willing to take substantial risks like termination, probation, poor performance reviews, demotion of responsibilities, loss of income, and even humiliation for the benefits of working from home. That was something that was very shocking for me. But like the quote says, work from home benefits are substantially hard to relinquish once you give them to people. And the data suggests momentum to expanding telework policies moving forward. Google is moving towards working remotely permanently. Amazon is, Microsoft, a lot of large companies are moving towards this working from home model. In conclusion, cyber criminals have continued to evolve tactics over the years because of how profitable it is. That fraud triangle is real and true. As long as the three components are present, they will continue to act. COVID-19 increased our dependence on the internet's interconnectivity overnight, ultimately providing the prime opportunity for cyber criminals. And with increasing reliance on the internet at our fingertips, here, our phones, everywhere, cyber criminals have unlimited access to potential victims, and working from home culture continues. So that's also a concern.
This will be the outline of our presentation, but you will recall that you will realize that there's quite a number of intersectionalities that have been presented here, which are part of the content or which are critical in our presentation. And I would not elaborate further because those are the commonalities that we have identified. But what you can take home today is that there is a solution to the problems that have been presented here, which is the contribution that we are hoping that it finds a space in this conference and even in a global community. So if we could just elaborate, just to give you a broader picture, the pilgrimage of citizen preparedness. We really felt that it is important that we contextualize our discussion in this particular context because there seem to be a lot of things that are not making sense in South Africa. So it's like in the context of 30 years into our democratic dispensation, we've been like trying to navigate in a dark cloud. So ours is to say there's still room for all of us as South Africans to start anew, so that at least we know as we are starting anew, we are not starting maybe at a phase where we are not grounded on anything. But when we decide to start afresh, we should at least be grounded or anchored on something as a contribution to a weaker state of governance, which is our democratic dispensation. And our critical argument is that we do not yet, or for now, find any solution besides democracy. So I'll skip that. The paper explains that South Africans have used public riots to express their frustration and to make their voice heard. And I know internationally, if you travel, you say, I'm coming from South Africa, very few people would, are comfortable to be around you because you are either a suspect, and you could potentially throw a stone, or you are not, a rational human being, you cannot process your thinking. So that's an international identity. And there's quite a number of scholars that have written largely around that. There's quite a number of triggers that have led South Africans to feel like that. If I could just point one is the neoliberal policies, the looting of state resources, the care deployment and maladministration, which has tenderized the provision of accelerated service delivery to those that were promised. If I could also remind you that when South Africans were invited into the democratic dispensation, it was just depicted as a solution to their problems that they have inherited from the colonial era right into the apartheid dispensation. So the Messiah positioned him or herself as a solution. And in our argument, that's where we feel that the problem started, because there was no sense of responsibility that was meant to be reciprocated from the side of government and from the side of electorate, being people that are voting in South Africa. So to this day, we have noted that inequalities have persisted, and as such, there's a huge a division between those that have resources and those that have not. And as a result, there's a fragmentation of social cohesion and quite a number of things that should be supporting democracy. And one of the critical arguments that we're raising here is that till today, in as much as we do not have another way out, but the current democracy that we have is not consolidated. It is largely contested by quite a number of things. And we just decided to, as we are writing, we were like asking a lot of questions, but at the end of our writing, we are coming up with a solution. And these are some of the questions that we had to ask. Why are women excluded from the financial emancipation and partially involved in political leadership? Why are patterns of crime on the rise, so that such that South Africa has recorded quite a number of killings of people as well as of policemen every day? Why are public policies, which is critical, not improving the lives of South Africans? Why are the majority of South Africans subjected to survival on social grants? And we have seen that dependency rising even in the context of COVID-19 and even today. Why university graduates have not been created employment or entrepreneurship opportunities in South Africa? Why is government thinking that South African problems can only be solved by adapting what other advanced countries have tried in there? So these are critical questions that we are asking. And we are just, trying to reflect, to some of the triggers that have led to a chaotic state of South Africa. As we are guided by the critical theory, we felt that these are the questions that we really had to ask. And again, our argument or the relevance of the theory is supported by the scholars that I have cited here. And in the interest of time, I will not dwell much, but we were then questioning, why do we have so much inequalities? Why do we continue to have the haves and the have-nots in the democratic dispensation? Let me also skip this because I have. Then we continue to say the lack of unpreparedness of South African has paralyzed the preparedness, So the lack of not being there has crippled, the agency of being there. So yeah. So weaker governance in South Africa, which had also been discussed here, to say we are facing such problems in South Africa in a world as such, because we've got a weaker government in place. So South Africa, as I have said, has international aid and identity of being an unsafe because of public riots, because of disasters. No one wants to come to South Africa. So what we also recognize as we're writing is that the unpreparedness of South African government is an indication of a failed government. So I'm going to skip this, not that it is not important, but we were just writing from the lens of, narrative writers, because I'm an anthropologist, so we enjoy writing. And my colleagues would say, Haibo, keep it down, Zoli. However, the solution to the problems that South Africans are facing, we are contributing Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an element of government, of good government. And when we came here, on the wall, it is written, Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. We are saying we've got a good progressive constitution, in as much as it does have cracks there and there. but it's not being able to realize internet objectives. It is because there is a loss of Ubuntu amongst all of us in South Africa. Government is selfish, has squandered resources, and people have lost Ubuntu because they are now not willing to be part of a game-changing plan. So then we tried to conceptualize, not wanting it to sound like what other existing scholars, because this is not a new concept or a new philosophical thinking. Therefore, we are saying that good governance in South Africa would only be restored if leaders embrace the spirit of Ubuntu, or elements of good governance should be anchored. So it means they are there, but they are lacking an anchor. And we are saying Ubuntu is an altar, you know, that draws someone. So we further argue that, or explain that Ubuntu fosters balanced reciprocated energies. It simply means I am who I am because of you. I am in the leadership position just because you had your trust and faith in me. So I have that responsibility to make sure that I represent you and I respond to your need. This is missing in South Africa, hence there are patterns of corruption, looting of public resources. There's also a state capture, which seems to be, you know, taking very forms of shape, and poor service delivery. We are therefore also say that Ubuntu, the sense of Ubuntu constitutes corrupted, the absence of Ubuntu constitutes corrupted, unprepared leaders and unprepared citizens. And then we say, as a response to that, Ubuntu is the maximization of good for people, which is linked to utilitarianism. And therefore we conceptualize the utilitarianism through a theory. But again, what we like about our writing journey is that there are no scholars in Africa and internationally that have contributed this. Dr. Stenden, what did you call it? This
Concept of
yes, this is what we are saying. Ubuntu, we have contributed Ubuntu as an overarching element of good governance, because if it finds space in our daily ways of living, therefore consensus orientation will be maximized in South Africa. Both ways. There will be accountability. Both leaders in Africa and citizens would embrace an element of accountability. There will be transparency. When government feels that there are things that they cannot do, which they had promised, they would find that responsibility, the edge to respond and be transparent to those they are leading, so that matters will be known. When our leaders are anchored on Ubuntu, they will be responsive in the ways they do things. And Ubuntu promotes equitable and inclusive behavior, reciprocated energies. So no one will believe that she is or he is on the side of the table. There will be a round table where everyone is created a seat. As a result, there will be no racial inequalities, there will be no marginalization, because Ubuntu would recognize that we need to start seeing South Africans not only through the skin pigmentation. And our government will then be able to respond to our service delivery needs effectively and efficiently. And there's going to be a celebrated public participation. So this is our contribution, which is the pilgrimage of preparedness in the context of weaker state of governance in South Africa.